Mark had always considered the wilderness his second home. A seasoned camper, he'd spent countless nights under the stars. The scent of pine and damp earth, a comforting lullaby. He knew the difference between a deer rustling leaves and a bear breaking branches. He understood the language of the forest, or so he thought. His usual haunts, familiar and predictable, had begun to feel a little too tame. He craved the thrill of the unknown, the quiet challenge of a truly remote spot. That's how he found himself driving down a barely there logging road, miles from the nearest town, the GPS signal flickering in and out. The map he'd painstakingly marked with a red pen promised a pristine, untouched clearing beside a glacial lake, deep within a national forest. No designated campsites, no fire pits, just raw, untamed nature. Perfect. He parked his beat-up SUV at the end of the passable track, shouldered his pack, and began the short hike in, the afternoon sun dappling through the dense canopy. The clearing was everything he'd hoped for. A small, secluded patch of emerald green grass, bordered by ancient, towering pines. With the lake shimmering like polished steel in the distance, he set up his tent with practiced ease, gathered firewood, and soon had a cheerful blaze crackling, its warmth a welcome contrast to the crisp mountain air. As dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, he cooked a simple meal, the aroma of sizzling sausage mingling with the earthy scent of the forest. This was it. This was why he camped. The profound solitude, the quiet majesty of the wild. As darkness deepened, the forest came alive with its nocturnal symphony, the hoot of an owl, the chirping of crickets, the distant cry of a coyote. Mark leaned back against a log, sipping hot coffee, the firelight dancing on his face. He felt a profound sense of peace. He checked his phone. No signal, as expected. Good. No distractions. Just him and the vast, silent wilderness. He stoked the fire, adding a few more logs, ensuring it would burn bright for hours. A seasoned camper knew the importance of a good fire, not just for warmth and cooking, but for keeping curious wildlife at bay. He zipped up his tent, crawled into his sleeping bag, and drifted off to sleep. The crackle of the fire and the gentle hum of the forest his only companions. He woke with a start, not to a sound, but to an absence of sound. The crickets had gone silent. The hooting owl was gone. The forest held its breath. The fire, though still glowing, had died down to embers, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch into the oppressive darkness beyond its dwindling light. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. He lay still, straining his ears, trying to identify what had disturbed the natural rhythm of the night. Then he heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible rustle of leaves, just beyond the perimeter of the firelight. It wasn't the heavy tread of a deer, nor the lumbering gait of a bear. It was lighter, more deliberate, like someone, or something, was moving with a cautious, almost predatory grace. He held his breath, his eyes wide, fixed on the shifting shadows. The rustling stopped. Silence again, thick and suffocating. And then, the snickering. It was low, guttural, and utterly inhuman. Not a laugh, not a giggle, but a sound that scraped against his nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. It was too deep for a child, too mocking for an animal. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. A disembodied sound that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. It was just beyond the reach of the firelight, a taunting presence at the very edge of his perceived safety. Mark slowly, carefully, unzipped his tent. The air outside was colder than before, a damp, unnatural chill that seeped into his bones. He grabbed his flashlight, its beam a weak, trembling spear against the overwhelming darkness. He swept it across the tree line, but saw nothing. Just the impenetrable wall of trees, their branches swaying almost imperceptibly in a breeze he couldn't feel. The snickering stopped. He stood there, flashlight beam cutting through the night, listening, his breath hitched in his throat. Then the footsteps began, slow, deliberate, a soft crunch of leaves, a faint snap of a twig. They circled his campsite, always just out of sight, always at the very edge of the fire's dying glow. He could hear them moving, a constant, unsettling patrol around his tent. Sometimes they would stop, and the snickering would resume, closer now, a wet, rasping sound that seemed to vibrate in the very air around him. He imagined eyes, unseen and malevolent, watching him from the darkness, just beyond the reach of his light. He tried to rationalize it. An animal, perhaps, a fox, a raccoon, curious and bold. But the snickering, no animal made that sound, and the deliberate, circling footsteps, never breaking cover, always maintaining that precise distance from the fire. It was too intelligent, too purposeful. He felt like prey, trapped in a spotlight, while something unseen stalked the shadows, playing a cruel game. He spent the rest of the night huddled in his tent, flashlight clutched in his hand, its beam a futile defense against the encroaching dread. Every rustle, every snap, every low, mocking snicker sent a fresh wave of terror through him. He imagined grotesque shapes, twisted limbs, eyes that glowed in the dark. He pictured himself dragged from his tent, screaming into the silent forest, his cries swallowed by the vast, indifferent wilderness. He was going to die here. He was certain of it. The thought was a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He listened to the footsteps, the snickering, the slow, agonizing crawl of time, waiting for the inevitable. But the inevitable never came. The sounds continued, a relentless, psychological torture, until the first faint hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy, painting the forest in hues of grey and pale gold. The sounds ceased. Abruptly, the snickering, the footsteps, the oppressive silence, all gone. Mark lay still for a long moment, listening to the returning chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves in a morning breeze. It was over. He was alive. A wave of profound relief, mixed with an unsettling sense of unreality, washed over him. He slowly unzipped his tent, his muscles stiff, his eyes gritty from lack of sleep. The campsite looked exactly as he had left it. The fire pit, now just a pile of cold ashes. His tent, undisturbed. He scanned the ground around the perimeter of where the firelight had been. No footprints, no broken twigs, no disturbed leaves. Nothing. It was as if the night had been a terrifying hallucination, a product of his overactive imagination and the isolation of the deep woods. But the fear, the raw, visceral terror that had gripped him for hours, was undeniably real. He packed his gear with a frantic energy he hadn't known he possessed. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call made him jump. He didn't bother with breakfast, didn't even stop for coffee. He just wanted out of this clearing, out of this forest, back to the familiar, comforting chaos of civilization. He shouldered his pack, took one last, wary look around the pristine, innocent-looking clearing, and began the hike back to his SUV, his pace quick and determined. The walk back felt longer, the trees seeming to press in on him, their shadows darker, more menacing. He reached his SUV, fumbling with the keys, his hands trembling slightly. He threw his pack into the back, jumped into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The roar of the motor, a welcome sound in the oppressive quiet. He put the car in reverse, glancing in his rearview mirror to back out of the narrow track, and that's when he saw it, tucked neatly under his windshield wiper. A small, folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there when he parked. He stared at it, a cold dread seeping into his stomach, colder than any night chill. He knew, with a certainty that made his blood run cold, that this was not a note from a fellow camper or a park ranger. This was from them. With a trembling hand, he reached out and pulled the note free. It was a simple, plain white piece of paper, folded once. He unfolded it, scrawled across it in a messy, almost childlike handwriting, was a single sentence. "I hope you had a good night of sleep." There were no smudges, no fingerprints, no trace of who had placed it there. Just those words, He dropped the note, his gaze darting to the rearview mirror, then to the back seat, then to the dense woods surrounding him. He slammed the car into drive, gravel spitting from beneath his tires, and sped away, leaving the silent, watchful forest behind. He never went camping again, but every night when he closed his eyes, he could still hear the snickering just beyond the firelight, and he knew with chilling certainty that he hadn't been alone in the woods that night, and they had enjoyed watching him.